Imagine this. You walk into a room and before a single word is spoken, you're already adjusting. Not your clothing, not your tone, but yourself. You scan the energy, read the faces, detect the expectations like invisible wires running beneath the floor, and almost instinctively you shift, you recalibrate, you become who they need you to be, smiling just enough, speaking just right, carefully folding parts of yourself that might be too loud, too raw, too real. You don't think of it as lying, you think of it as being appropriate, being successful, being good. But here's the thing you don't say out loud. You don't know how to stop, because the performance never ends. Not when you leave the room, not when you're alone, not even when you're looking in the mirror. You've become so good at being who others expect that you've forgotten who you were before you had to earn every moment of belonging. And worse, you're rewarded for it. They love you for the version of you that is digestible, polished, strategic, the one who's always on, always composed, always fine. But deep down, you're tired. Not from doing too much, but from being too little of yourself. And still, you keep performing. Why? Why does silence feel like failure? Why does stillness feel like danger? Why does authenticity feel like a risk you can't afford? You're not alone in this. Most people live their entire lives in performance mode, smiling when they want to scream, nodding when they want to leave, succeeding while secretly eroding. We live in a world where performing isn't optional. It's expected, praised, monetized. But at what cost? What do we lose when we confuse performance with identity? Who are you when there's no one watching? And are you brave enough to meet that person again? Because the mask you wear may have protected you once, but now it might be the very thing keeping you from your life. Let's find out why. Let's pull back the curtain on this quiet addiction to being everything, except yourself. The compulsion to perform isn't vanity, it's survival. You weren't born rehearsing. You were born reaching, crying, laughing, expressing without filters. You were fully there, and someone taught you that wasn't safe. Maybe it was a parent who only responded to you when you were quiet, obedient, or impressive. Maybe it was a teacher who rewarded your good behavior but scolded your creativity. Maybe it was the unspoken lesson you learned from society itself. Be who they like, not who you are. And so you did. You performed, and they clapped. Carl Jung, the persona and the shadow Swiss psychiatrist, Carl Jung called this socially acceptable mask the persona, the version of ourselves we present to the world. It's not inherently false. In fact, it's necessary. It helps us navigate society, maintain roles, interact with others. But over time, many of us forget the difference between the persona and the self. We identify with the mask. We become the performance. And what we repress in order to maintain that mask. That becomes the shadow, the rejected parts of ourselves we fear will make us unlovable, unworthy, unfit. The more you perfect the persona, the more your shadow grows, not as evil, but as truth denied. And here's where the sickness begins. You start performing to avoid the discomfort of your own authenticity. Donald Winnicott, The False Self. British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott took this even deeper. He described the false self as a psychological defense, a structure that forms when a child senses their true emotions won't be accepted. The false self is clever, compliant, pleasing. It knows how to be admired, but it lives in fear of being known. Winnicott warned that when the false self dominates, the real self becomes hidden, eventually stifled to the point of disconnection. This leads to feelings of emptiness, identity confusion, and a quiet grief for something we can't quite name. We call it burnout. We call it anxiety. But at its root, it's this: the ache of not being seen, even by ourselves. Nietzsche, the herd and the actor. Friedrich Nietzsche, the radical philosopher, warned of herd morality, a culture where the individual becomes what the crowd rewards, not what the soul demands. In such a world, we become actors in our own lives, repeating socially approved scripts, terrified to deviate from the norm. Authenticity, in this context, becomes rebellion. The individual has always had to struggle, Nietzsche wrote, to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And perhaps that's why performance feels so compulsive. Because deep down, we know, to be fully ourselves means risking exile from the comfort of approval. Modern society, the economy of image. We live in a time where your image is your currency. We don't just perform in public, we perform online. Every post, every caption, every likable version of ourselves is curated for consumption. We sell the highlight reel and bury the behind the scenes. Authenticity is now a brand, something to be crafted, marketed, and measured. Even vulnerability has become a performance. And when your performance gets more love than your truth, you start to believe the lie. They love this version of me. Maybe this is all I should be. And so the cycle continues. You wake up and perform. You go to sleep and rehearse. You live in fear that the truth underneath, the one who's messy, unsure, alive, won't be enough. But here's the deeper truth. You didn't invent this performance. It was handed to you, built for you, reinforced by everyone who loved the version of you that didn't make them uncomfortable. You've been trying to survive in a system that teaches you to abandon yourself and rewards you for doing it well. But surviving is not the same as living, and deep down, you feel it. This performance isn't sustainable. Let's now explore what it does to you. This quiet war between who you are and who you pretend to be. Because the consequences aren't always obvious, but they are devastating. At first, the performance feels like protection. It wins you friends. It gets you praise. It helps you move through the world with ease, composure, control. But beneath the surface, something begins to erode. Not your reputation, not your success, but yourself. And the tragedy is, most people never even notice the erosion happening because the world keeps applauding, and applause drowns out the quiet sound of a soul fading. The loss of inner voice. When you live in performance long enough, you stop hearing your own voice. You no longer ask, "What do I feel?" You ask, "What's expected of me?" You no longer wonder, "What do I want?" You wonder, "What will make them approve of me?" Eventually, the difference between genuine desire and social script disappears. You forget how to want freely. You second-guess every impulse. You don't trust your own gut, because your entire nervous system has been rewired to seek external cues. This is the beginning of self-abandonment. And it doesn't show up as a crisis, not at first. It shows up as chronic indecision, emotional numbness, restlessness without cause, a subtle dread in the pit of your stomach every time you're alone. The collapse of intimacy. You cannot be loved if you are never known. But when you're always performing, always polished, agreeable, together, people fall in love with your mask, not your complexity, not your contradictions, not your truth. And so even when you're surrounded by people, you feel alone. Because connection without authenticity is not intimacy. It's presentation. You go through the motions of closeness, small talk, smiles, dinners, but something's missing, something essential. You wonder why no one really gets you. But how could they? You've been so good at hiding that you've made it impossible to be found. The trap of success. Without self-performers often rise. You say the right things. You play the part. You become the version of yourself that others will promote, vote for, follow. And you win. On paper, you win. But then you look around, at the career, the house, the followers, and you feel nothing. Because you built a life from performance. And now you're stuck living in a reality that belongs to someone you never were. This is why burnout often isn't physical. It's existential. You're not exhausted because you've done too much. You're exhausted because you've been someone else for too long. The emotional cost, anxiety, shame, emptiness. Performing is exhausting, but more than that, it's disorienting. You begin to feel like an imposter in your own life. Even in your moments of joy, there's a lingering question. Do I actually feel this? Or am I supposed to feel this? Over time, your emotions flatten. Joy is dull. Sadness feels unsafe. Anger feels shameful. You become emotionally neutral, not because you don't feel, but because your feelings don't fit the script. This emotional muting leads to low-grade depression, anxiety, and a chronic gnawing feeling of being unreal, like you're watching yourself live rather than living. The deepest consequence: forgetting who you are. This is the most dangerous cost of performance. Amnesia, not of facts, but of identity. You've worn the mask so long, you no longer remember what it feels like to speak without editing, to cry without hiding, to want without shame. You begin to think the mask is you. You defend it. You fear losing it, because beneath it, there's uncertainty, vulnerability, risk, but also freedom. And that's the paradox. You can't stop performing because the mask has become your armor, but the armor is now the prison. And you've been standing at the locked gate, holding the key in your hand. You just forgot that you could open it. It's time to remember. Not how to perform better, but how to stop performing at all. Let's talk about that next. Let's talk about what it means to rebel. Not loudly, but quietly. Not against others, but against the part of you that believes performance is the only way to be loved. Because the truth is this: you were never meant to be a role. You were meant to be real. The rebellion doesn't begin with fire. It begins with a pause, not an explosion, not a dramatic exit, but a breath. The moment you catch yourself mid-performance and whisper, "This isn't me," that's where it starts. Not with a rejection of the world, but with a quiet decision to stop rejecting yourself. Because the only way out of performance is through presence. Step 1. Name the act. The first act of rebellion is awareness. You must begin to notice when you're performing, not with judgment, but with honesty. Do you smile when you're actually tired? Do you agree to things that make you feel hollow? Do you say yes just to be liked? Do you wear confidence like armor while you're cracking inside? Track these moments, not to shame yourself, but to see yourself. Because seeing the mask is the first step toward releasing it. Step 2. Break the script. Performance lives in patterns, in habitual responses, in conditioned roles, in the things you do without thinking. Start disrupting them. Say, "I don't know," when you're expected to impress. Say, "I need a moment," instead of offering immediate answers. Say, "That doesn't feel right to me," instead of nodding politely. These aren't small acts. They're seismic. Each one is a tremor beneath the surface of your false self. Each one cracks the mask. Step 3. Choose depth over applause. The world will offer you two paths. One paved with praise, one paved with truth. Most people choose the former because it's easier to be liked than to be real. But truth brings peace. Praise only brings pressure. Reclaiming yourself means letting go of being liked by everyone, so you can finally be known by someone, and that someone must be you first. Step 4. Practice presence over performance. Performance is always forward-facing. It's calculated, controlled, strategic. Presence is alive. To be present is to respond in real time, to risk saying the wrong thing, to show up messy, contradictory, unfinished. That's where intimacy lives. That's where real life begins. So give yourself permission to be incomplete, to not always know what to say, to not always look composed, to not always be strong. Because what's more powerful than perfection is authenticity without apology. Step 5. Build a life that doesn't demand performance. Some environments require your mask. Some relationships only know how to love the version of you that pleases, that entertains, that overfunctions. But you don't have to stay there. Begin curating your life like a sanctuary. Seek out people who make room for your full humanity. Design spaces where silence is okay, where honesty is welcome, where masks are unnecessary. Because the more you surround yourself with people and places that honor your truth, the less you'll feel the urge to perform. And slowly, performance will stop being your default, and presence will become your home. This is the rebellion. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It won't earn applause, but it will set you free. It's the moment you stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What do I need to come alive again?" Because the truth is, the world doesn't need more polished personas. It needs you. The you beneath the act. The you behind the applause. The you who forgot they didn't have to earn love by being anything but real. And you're closer to that self than you think. Let's meet them, fully, in the final truth.